recording. Let me share the screen. Okay, guys. So today's class will be like a one-off. I don't think that like, despite being a lot of things, I don't think it would be very useful to have just a lot of classes on each specific protocol in each specific project. So it will be a one-off class on DeFi, trying to understand it, looking at some interesting protocols, a little bit on how they work. And yeah, so like differently from the other classes where we had series, we had 1 to 5, 1 to 4, this one will be like a one-off. Okay, so first, what even is DeFi and what does it offer, right? So you have probably heard this by now, but I mean, we have to cite it at least for someone that hasn't heard it before. But DeFi stands for decentralized finance. So it's trying to offer the services that you usually have in centralized finance, like banks and insurance companies and stuff like that, in a decentralized manner. So instead of using like trust and law to provide those financial services, DeFi uses smart contracts, cryptography, and the blockchain. So we have this principle that code is law, right? So everything that's written on the code will be enforced and there's nothing you can do about it. All right. Okay. So why does this matter? Why would we want those decentralized financial services? So first things first, it's generally not subject to government regulations. So no one can impede you from using and providing those services. No one can like impede you from borrowing money on Aave or lending money on Aave, or for example, on Unslash, which is a decentralized insurance protocol. No one can impede you from buying an insurance contract or like providing money for those insurance like projects. Uh, so there are some concerns with DeFi that it can be eventually like regulated, because a government, especially if it's a public blockchain and it has a company behind it, such as Uniswap, like the company that kind of owns the Uniswap platform is Uniswap Labs, I think, and it's based in the US. So a government can go like after those companies and require them to do certain things. So for example, in September, Uniswap, before that, they were allowing you to trade, and we'll look a little bit more in depth into this later, but they were allowing you to trade synthetic versions of stocks, which were made through the Mirror protocol. And then the US government like hit up the Uniswap Labs and said, well, what the hell are you doing? You can't do that. That's like equities trading, right? And so they delisted it from the platform. So now you can just go there and type, for example, Google, and you can trade the Google stock via the Uniswap exchange. So it also, due to a more like competitive environment, it provides generally more attractive interest rates than centralized finance, both for lending money and for borrowing money. And it also has like lower fees for swaps sometimes. For example, if you buy stocks, like disregarding this Mirror example right here, you can still buy the Mirror stocks, for example, in the Terra blockchain, so Luna. The Mirror protocol still exists there, and it still exists on the Ethereum blockchain. It's just a little bit harder to interact with it. So when you're buying stocks in the real world, sometimes you're gonna have to pay like some huge fees, right? Commissions and like fees for holding it overnight and something like that. In DeFi, you're generally not gonna have that, right? And anyone can trade it at any time and no one can impede you, especially because the transactions in the blockchain, they are irreversible, right? No one can do anything to reverse them. Okay, so how do you get access to DeFi? And this, again, is relatively basic, but if you're interacting with DeFi through your centralized exchange, through like Coinbase or something like that, you're not really interacting with DeFi, right? You're kind of exposed to the same, all the risks that centralized finance has, together with being exposed to all the risks that DeFi has. So, I mean, you're not really exposed to it. So you have to withdraw those coins and tokens to your own wallet and use the network that you want to use. Note that there are like wrapped versions of certain coins that work in different chains. So as we know, Bitcoin is its own like blockchain, right? And here, sorry, it's not BTCB, it's WBTC. So for example, you wrap the Bitcoin in a token that exists in the Ethereum blockchain or ERC20, and then you can use BTC in that chain. Or you can wrap Ethereum, for example, B Ethereum, which is for the Binance Smart Chain or BEP20, okay? However, do note that not all networks are available on all chains. So for example, I don't think you can, but I don't know that if you can use the Solana blockchain on MetaMask, for example, which is the most commonly used wallet. So you have to download its own wallet and use everything through there, okay? Okay, so what are the most basic DeFi services? These are like the most common services offered in most, if not all, blockchains with smart contract capabilities. Of course, there are like some really recent blockchains that, you know, have had relatively recent smart contract capabilities, such as Cardano, and it doesn't offer these things yet, but it will offer, and there are like many projects already being developed for it. But these are the most basic services. So we have lending and borrowing, which is like using your crypto or stable coins, which are also crypto, but you know, just to point a little bit of a difference, to generate interest and as collateral for loans, right? So you can lend it to people and you can borrow from people, both crypto and stable coins. It can be used for swaps and providing liquidity. So you can use your crypto to trade. So you trade, for example, 1 Ethereum for 10 Doge Elon Mars, right? And vice versa. And you can also provide liquidity. And we'll see a little bit more what this means, which kind of generates income, passive income from the trading fees for you. And you can also do what we call yield farming, which uses the smart contracts in some way to generate some passive income. Now, there are many ways, right? And like covering them all right now would take too much time, but the most basic ways that they generate income is either through like the proof of stake staking, so ETH 2.0 or Cardano staking or something like that. It can be through like providing liquidity. It can be, and we'll see a little bit more about this later, it can be through what we call inflationary rewards, which means like the owners of the token, they are creating new tokens and distributing the tokens to owners that have it in pools or something like that as a means to encourage them holding, right? It can be through like, if it's a platform such as PancakeSwap or something like that, you can earn part of the money they earn just by keeping it in a staking pool. So PancakeSwap has like lotteries, and it obviously charges trading fees and stuff like that. And by having your cake, which is the token for PancakeSwap stake in their pool, you're receiving a part of that interest along with inflationary rewards. And like most of them, they use like different things to generate income. It's not just one, but these are the ways, right? And there's also a bit more advanced ones, which is like providing insurance services and stuff like that. But we won't touch those right now because they are quite a lot more complicated. So now about the more uncommon and actually very much growing services that we can see in DeFi. And this is an example for the Mirror protocol. And in the Mirror protocol, you can just trade stocks. As I told you before, you can trade, for example, the Amazon, Microsoft, VIXI, even the S&P 500 you can trade. And you do like despite having exposure to the price of those assets, you don't actually need to, go to a stockbroker and buy a stock for that. It's done completely through the blockchain. Okay. However, as I said, this is very new and it hasn't been implemented in all blockchains yet. I assume that at some point in the future, we'll see like more of these platforms, more of these kind of projects, more of these ideas, and they will like grow and expand to more blockchains. So for insurance, you're using your crypto to pay for and to provide some sort of insurance services that does not rely on centralized authority. So there's a project, very interesting project. I forgot the name, but we'll see a little bit more about them later to the specific projects, which is providing like crop insurance in Kenya. So if the weather goes bad and the harvest of their crops is not so good, then at least they have some insurance and they can cash some money to, get through to the next year, right? And it's not relying on a centralized authority. It's not relying on like some stockbroker saying, well, I have a monopoly here and I can just provide the price that I want for this insurance and exploit them, right? And again, you can mirror real world assets just like the mirror protocol uses. So you use your crypto to gain exposure to real equities such as stocks, index funds, but again, without centralization, without like a stockbroker prohibiting you from trading GameStop stock, for example, how we saw last year, I think, right? Okay, so what do those two have in common? They use what we call oracles, right? Because they need to, in some way, see something that didn't happen on the blockchain. They need to see if the harvest on Kenya was bad, if the price, what is the price of a given stock. So they use those oracles, and some examples of oracles are like Link, Chainlink, or Band, and there are many more. But Link, which is considered the gold standard, it has a very complex protocol, which you can check in their website how they solve what we call the blockchain oracle problem, which is precisely that the blockchains cannot connect to the external world. It uses multiple methods to quantify like data provider reliability, their reputation, and then they can use multiple data sources, and it is more decentralized than having like, for example, if you have a single data source, a single point telling you, for example, the rain in Kenya was bad, that single data source, it can be manipulated quite easily. And so it is more centralized. Now, if you have multiple data sources and you trust them in different ways and you have different ways to generate consensus from that, then you have a decentralized oracle, okay? And it is less vulnerable to attacks. Okay. Now, two, for the second part, we'll go a little bit more in depth with the services. Now, right here, I have a screenshot of the Brazilian project that is actually kind of a DeFi portfolio viewer, right? It shows you how much you have to collect in yield farms, how much you have borrowed, how much you have in loans, and how much you owe, the health of those loans, etc. And it is very interesting. There are a lot of those projects, and we'll see what each of those like projects, what each of those services is. Okay. Okay. So first, the simplest of them all is lending, right? You just put your crypto, your stable coin, or something like that to lend to someone, and you earn interest from that, because someone can just have your money for free and then give you back later without paying anything. They pay some sort of interest. Now, when you do that, the risks associated with it are mostly from the platform itself, right? So if it gets hacked, your funds might be compromised. If it is a rug pull, then you might lose your funds, right? But this is a risk that you can avoid when doing DeFi, right? The same, like in the same way that in the real world, you might be giving your money to a scammer, in the digital world, you can be giving your crypto to a scammer too. However, and this is another thing that we should take a little bit of attention. Sometimes when you're going to lend your crypto, the the interest they pay you at the start is quite high. So sometimes you can even see like 1,000% APY, 1,000,000% APY. And that is kind of together with those inflationary rewards we talked a little bit about before. It is made to incentivize new users because people see those flashy numbers, those huge numbers. They say, wow, 1,000,000% APY. I hold that for 1 year and then I'm going to be a millionaire or something like that. But it just decays with time, right? So usually at the start, the interest paid is very high. And with time, as those rewards decay, the interest paid is also decaying. Okay. Secondly, we have borrowing. So with borrowing, things start getting a little bit more complicated. So since you're borrowing money, you need to use some sort of collateral to borrow against, right? So in this case, it's crypto. So similarly to margin trading, if you check the Trading Basics series, if the amount you owe is too close to the collateral value that you have provided, you'll be liquidated and lose the collateral amount. You will just lose the money that you put in there. Okay. Well, why and how will I borrow, right? Well, first, we know that the crypto loans are heavily collateralized. It depends on the protocol. Of course, there are protocols that let you take more on a loan. There are protocols that let you take less, but in all of them, you cannot take a loan on more than you have provided as collateral, right? Because they cannot go to your house and take your house like a bank. However, the interest rates are usually quite low. So it's not unusual to see something like 0.1% APY or even lower. And that's really low. That's a really small amount to pay. So why should I borrow? So first, it gives you access to margin trading, as we discussed, so leverage. And second, you can use some of those crypto gains and you can spend it on something without necessarily selling your coins. So say it's maybe a bear market and you take a loan on stable coins, you cash out those stable coins to maybe pay for an investment that you have to make, or like get started on a business or something like that, and you don't have to sell your coins, then you pay back the loan and you still have your crypto. And especially if that crypto appreciated with time, then the amount that you have to pay back is relatively little to the amount you would have if you sold your crypto, right? And for more details on how to do this and strategies and stuff like that, you can check the Meld interview, the interview that Ryan did with the founder of Meld for more like context on this. Okay. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about swapping, and like the main player on this swapping game is Uniswap, right? It's the largest swap, like the largest decentralized exchange that we have. So a smart contract capable chain does not have to be constrained to a single token. So for example, the Ethereum blockchain does not have to have just Ethereum, right? It has millions, like thousands of tokens. It has Shiba, it has Chainlink, it has multiple tokens. And in the Ethereum blockchain, it is tokens with the ERC 721 standard. And well, how do I swap? Let's say I have some ETH and I want to buy some Shiba. How do I swap for those? You use the DEXs. So you use Uniswap on Ethereum. You use PancakeSwap on the Binance Smart Chain. You use Serum on the Solana blockchain. And like all of them, that have been around for a while, all of the blockchains have at least a decentralized exchange. Okay. Okay. Now, how does liquidity work? Because we know that while blockchains, they are relatively fast and they are very reliable, they do not have just the absolute speed and volume that like a centralized exchange has. And it's just not feasible to use the order book model that we discussed a bit into the Trading Basics series, where someone to buy, someone else needs to sell. Well, how do we solve that? we solve that through what we call the liquidity pools. So this is the main purpose of the DEXs. Instead of having the market making done by sellers and buyers, you have an automated market making, which uses the liquidity pools, which we will discuss a little bit more in just a second. And you maintain, without like much activity, which without order books, you maintain a liquid and a stable market. Okay. Okay. So what are those liquidity pools? Well, instead of using those limit orders and those market orders, they use the automated market makers, as I said, in which a liquidity provider will usually, nowadays, there are some protocols which let you have a liquidity pools with 8 assets with different proportions, but this starts getting really complicated really quick, and it's really early for those protocols too. So we're going to discuss the most simple liquidity pool there is, which is a 50-50. You have 2 assets, each one of them has half of the value on the liquidity pool. So for example, when you're buying Ethereum from an Ethereum USDC pool, you're depositing USDC into it and withdrawing the equivalent amount of Ethereum. So the automated market maker, it will then adjust the price of each asset according to the amount you bought and then the amount you sold, because it has to keep that constant value. So if you take one Ethereum and Ethereum stays at the same price, then the value in the pool has decreased. Okay. And the liquidity provider, it receives part of the trading fees that you paid just to make that swap. Okay. And that's the passive income part of liquidity provider. Now, let's talk a bit about the elephant in the room, which is a term that you might have heard and that might have scared you from providing liquidity in the past, which is impermanent loss. What is it, right? Remember, the AMM, the automated market maker, it will adjust the prices of each asset when you buy or sell the assets. So this is the root of the impermanent loss. If one asset is bought, for example, just the amount that you have in the pool from that asset that was bought is reduced, and just simply buying and holding the assets instead of providing liquidity for them would yield greater returns than keeping them in the liquidity pool. How does that happen? Well, the way that most automated market makers work is through what we call the constant product formula. So say we have 2 assets, right? A and B. Asset A and asset B, and one asset A is worth the same as 5 of the asset B. Okay, so let's say I want to create a liquidity pool with 12 of the asset A and 60 of the asset B. So the product between those is 12 times 60, which is 720. Okay, say someone else, not necessarily me, wants to buy 12 of that asset B. So the pool would now have 48 of the asset B, right? Because I took 12 from 60, right? But the product of A times B must stay constant and is equal to 720 in this case, right? So how many of the asset A will I pay? So if we divide 720 by those 48 right here, we get 15. So the pool will now have 15 of the asset A. What that means is that I pay 3 asset A to get 12 of the asset B. However, if you just pay some attention, you'll see that initially one asset A bought 5 asset B. However, I bought those 12 asset B for 3 of the asset A, which means I paid 1A for 4B. So what happened? Well, what happened is actually pretty simple. The pool rebalanced, right, to accommodate the new amounts of each asset that it contains. So let's say, for example, and this is to kind of picture the impermanent loss better, let's say that the asset A is a stable coin and the value it has is fixed at $1. So initially, the pool had 12 of the asset A and 60 of the B. So in total, we had $24, right, at the start. Now, the pool has 15 of the asset A and 48 of the asset B. So in total, we have $30 in the pool, correct? However, if I just instead of providing liquidity for this pair, if I just held the 12A and the 60B, I would have approximately $30.75, which is like a little bit more than I would have due to the rebalancing. So this is the impermanent loss. Due to providing liquidity, the balance you have now is a little bit less than it would be if you just bought and held. Now, this is a chart on impermanent loss, right? And this just illustrates that the more one asset deviates against the other, the bigger the impermanent loss is. If the pair stays constant, let's say, for example, Ethereum and a stable coin that's pegged to Ethereum, a stable coin that's worth exactly 1 Ethereum. As long as it is at that point, as long as it doesn't deviate, you don't have any impermanent loss. And you can see it's also a bit asymmetrical. So when the token increases, the impermanent loss is quite little, right? The token can increase by 500%, and your impermanent loss is like just about 25%, but you've gained 500%. So you don't lose money when the token goes up, you just gain less than you could have gained, right? But when it goes down a lot faster. So you gotta be careful for a bit, but also remember that it is impermanent loss. So if the ratio between those two assets stays the same, or if it goes a lot up and then it comes back down to the price at which you provide liquidity initially, then you don't have any like impermanent loss, but you collect all the trading fees from that period. Okay. Well, why will they do liquidity pools then if I'm subject to this like risk that I'm just not subject while holding those coins? Well, first thing is, if you expect like an asset to go sideways for a long time, then you will generate like some passive income just for the trading fees that people have paid. So for example, if we take like the cake chart right here, let's say cake BUSD, you can see cake has been going kind of sideways for like the past, let's see how long. Cake has been going kind of sideways for almost 2 months right now. So anyone that provided liquidity in this time period right here kind of did well, right? Because they collected all the trading fees that we had in this entire period right here, and their impermanent loss is relatively minimal. Okay. Now, secondly, just the yield that you get from providing liquidity can be high enough that it offsets the impermanent loss. So some new projects, some tokens, they will offer you additional rewards aside from the trading fees. They will offer you additional rewards for making a liquidity pool. So that incentivizes people to provide liquidity and makes the token more stable, right? And also, as I said, if the pair comes back to the ratio it was when you provided liquidity, there's no impermanent loss, and you keep all the trading yield that you had. Okay. Now there's another discussion, and this is a little bit of a more nuanced discussion and more individual like response, individual answer, that maybe impermanent loss when it goes up, it's not actually so bad, because it's kind of like you were kind of taking profits all the way up, because it's selling the asset that went up and buying a stable coin, for example. So there's some discussion to that, and you can find videos on YouTube and like articles on the internet discussing this theme. You just search for like why impermanent loss does not matter or something like that, and you'll find like lots and lots of great content. Okay. Now the risks and dangers of it, again, the main risks is the safety of the protocol. So if the project is a scam or if it gets hacked, there's usually nothing you can do about it. So maybe if it gets hacked, the project has some sort of an insurance fund, and it can pay you back at least a little bit, but usually you cannot do anything about it. All the transactions in the blockchain are irreversible, so you cannot do anything. For impermanent loss, it's generally right. smarter to provide liquidity when you expect volatility to remain low. So maybe in the kind of bear market or bear season we had earlier this year, where coins were not fluctuating by that much, it would be maybe depending on the coin, depending on the pair, to provide like intelligent to provide liquidity in that pair. Also, if you have like coins that are worth essentially the same thing or very, very highly correlated, such as, for example, USD and USDC, they are mostly risk-free, right? Because, for example, those two right here, they are both worth $1 at any point in time. And this is a mostly risk-free investment. Now, with stable coins, we must be careful too. So if it's a lesser known stable coin, if it's like a new protocol that's generating those stable coins, then what can happen is that it can lose the peg. So it can no longer be attached to the initial, for example, $1, and then you just lose all the money. One example of that was recently we had the Titan peg, like it lost its peg. It was a stable coin pegged to $1, but suddenly, like it was emitting a lot more stable coins than it should, and it just went down to zero. And so everyone that had their money invested in it just lost it all, despite it being a stable coin, right? So this can happen, and it's something that you should pay attention to, especially with newer protocols and newer stable coins and stuff that you don't know. And there's again the discussion I told you guys a little bit earlier, if impermanent loss is so bad after all, right? And also, like, as I said, not necessarily stable coins, but assets that fluctuate really closely together. If you notice a very close correlation between two crypto assets. So at some points in time, not always, for example, the Bitcoin and Ethereum correlation is very high. So the Bitcoin Ethereum pair stays relatively stable. Let's take a look at it. BTC ETH, or actually ETH BTC, sorry. Yeah, we have more pairs. At some points in time, you can see it can go sideways for quite a long time, like maybe right here, maybe right here, right? And these are maybe the moments to when you expect something like this, and how to expect something like this. It's a whole TA class on volatility and that stuff, so we won't talk about it now. But a moment like this might be a moment where it's very interesting to provide liquidity in a ETH BTC pair. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about yield farming. So yield farming is like an umbrella term for generating passive income in DeFi. And there are all the other ways that I cited previously, like deflationary rewards and like the use of the platform, and actually inflationary rewards, the use of the platform, proof of stake, and all of that stuff. And well, beyond the liquidity pools and lending money, just placing your coins in some sort of protocol that pays interest, it just can pay you interest in some of these ways that I talked about. So it can print new coins in like a Ponzi fashion, kind of a Ponzi scheme, and you can make money on Ponzi schemes. You just have to be maybe very, 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 very careful. Okay. And it can also go through like multiple different passive income, multiple different liquidity pools, and take the rewards from this and put it in there, and then borrow it from here and just lend to there, so you can like generate the best yield possible for an asset. And there are like protocols that do that for you. Okay. Okay. So let's talk a little bit now about general principles for yield farming, which I think it's very, very important when you're doing yield farming, and especially if you want to adventure yourself into those degen farms. Okay, so first you must investigate like profoundly the protocol you're investing in and the token they're paying you in. So in most protocols, if you invest, say, USDT, it won't pay you back in USDT, right? It will pay you back in some sort of token that they created. So first, most of the time, the token they pay you is just highly inflationary, and it's long-term worthless. So it's just long-term going down because they're printing so many tokens to give to people that the value of the token cannot go up. So the best move for something like this would be just selling your rewards as often as you can for some other thing that's valuable, some other thing that you're interested in. So for example, you get a worthless token, you sell it as soon as you get it, and you buy Ethereum or you buy BNB or something like that. So, however, if it is a valuable token and you're not so sure about it, some other strategies that you can consider is to not buy the coin itself, so not buy this worthless coin, but to stake like your worth, like your coin with worth, say USDT, say BNB, something like that, and just keep the rewards. Just don't sell the rewards and keep it there. So if it goes to the moon, it goes to the moon and you earn a lot of money. If it crashes down, if it goes to zero, but the platform isn't hacked and you can keep your funds, then you haven't lost anything. You just lost the yield, not the valuable asset itself. Okay. Okay. Now, risks and dangers of yield farming. Now, once again, especially with those yield farming opportunities, especially with those high APRs and APYs, you must be very, very mindful of scams, of rug pulls, and cold vulnerabilities. Okay. So I personally do not put my money into anything that has not been audited. So we have auditing firms like Certic and some other ones like Hacken and others that just go through the code and they check if there are any vulnerabilities, if there are like anything that the team could do that could be malicious in nature, right? And just go not only check if it is audited, but go through the audit report, read it, see what you think. Like usually they'll tell you whatever they found. So let's go, for example, to the Certic website. Now they audit like Binance Smart Chain and Polygon projects. Now let's pick like one from the 35 page. So let's say this pixel coin right here. And they have like, in this case, 15 total findings. So you just go through the report right here, you click view PDF, and you check what were those findings. Are they concerning? What the team is doing to solve it, right? Okay. Let's not get too much time into that because if we did, would be like the entire night right here. So another big problem is the Ponzi nature of some of these projects, right? They just keep minting the worthless token to deliver on a promise like ridiculous APR, and the token just becomes worthless. Now, this is what we usually call the Degen protocols, right? The Degen protocols. They give you a high APR, but the token is just worthless. Now, there are also two things that you should keep in mind when you're going for yield farms. First is the difference between APR and APY. So APR is simple interest. So it's not compounding. And APY, it's compounding interest. So let's say it's 1% per month. If it's simple interest, it will just be 1% of the initial amount. If it's APY, if it is compounding interest, then it will be 1%, then 1% of 101%. Then it goes up and up and up. And it is kind of exponential in nature, okay? And also the fact that usually the interest they pay you decreases with time, especially if it is at the very beginning and the interest is very high. So you shouldn't keep the expectations that the interest in a DeFi application should be like exactly, or maybe even half, not even half. Most of the time it's like 1/10 or lower than it was at the beginning. Okay. Okay. So now we go to part 3, which is actually the most interesting to me, which is strategies and platform examples. Okay. So first, this is the most risk-averse strategy. Now, again, this is not financial advice. It's just a strategy that people use and that can make some passive income. So the safest way that you can generate the passive income in DeFi is through just lending stable coins and or making a stable coin paired LP. So BUSD to USDC or USDT to USDC or something like that. So the yields on these are not that crazy, right? You won't see, usually at least, something like 100% APY. You won't see that. But just earning 8 to 15% APY, which is like relatively common, is not a low number, especially if you compare it to US banks, which in like my little research, I couldn't like research a lot, but I found at the most 2% a year, right? And that's really low if you compare it to 8, 15, sometimes even 20, 30%, which is not a crazy amount, but it is money, right? It is a considerable amount, considering that you're not taking basically any risks, right? Despite the risk of A, the platform being hacked, and B, the stable coin that you chose turning out to be something that is just worthless, or there's hacked like the Titan stable coin. Okay. Now there's riskier, but still not Degen strategies. So one thing that you could do is you use your stable coins, you'll deposit them in Aave, for example. Let's say you deposit $5,000 in Aave. And then I think you can take and say you deposit those $5,000 in USDC, right? You can then take a loan on, like, I think the max is 75%. So $3,750 worth of, let's say, USDT, right? And then you use those stable coins that you borrowed to generate interest that is higher than the interest that you're paying to borrow it in another platform. So first, the money that you deposit on Aave is actually generating interest. So you're earning interest from that. Now you take the loan, and it has basically no risk since it's not volatile, right? And despite like excluding maybe a black swan event where the stable coin loses its peg, it has no risks of being defaulted, right? Assuming that the interest that you gain in a platform such as maybe even Aave or Curve Finance is higher than the interest that you're paying to borrow it, then you're making money. Now, this is, again, more risky because you're borrowing money and the black swan events could lead to your liquidation, but you're compounding the interest. You're kind of leveraging the interest yield, okay? Now, there's the third one, which is going degen. And this is where you will find those like 400% APR. And this was like in 5 seconds, I just searched for it, but you can find way crazier things. You can find 1,000,000% APR and something like that. Now, this is if you're confident in your ability to like just pick a legit project that is not like a Rockpool or something like that, and you're not risk averse, so you're willing maybe to get Rockpooled. Sometimes you're just playing with kind of gambling money at this time, right? So at this point, you might start getting into some of those 10,000% APYs. So one thing that you could do with this is, for example, use kind of the same strategy as the riskier strategy, the midpoint strategy right here, where you deposit some stable coins to earn interest and you borrow more stable coins against those stable coins. And then you can just use the borrowed stable coins to generate interest on, say, a Degen platform, and then you just dump every single time that they give you rewards. You just dump them and you sell them for more stable coins, and you just continue the cycle. Now, with these, one important thing, and I must repeat it because it's very important, is to stay humble, right? Some of the people that are most like well known on this kind of farming space say that you should stay humble, a humble farmer, right? So you shouldn't let the greed overtake you. What if this unknown token goes up 100x? You shouldn't do that. Just take the token, use it to buy something that's actually valuable, that you know it's valuable, and generate your income from that. Okay. Now let's see a little bit of those lending and borrowing platforms. As I've told, sometimes we have Aave, For example, let's search Aave. So here it is, and it's in Portuguese, and I cannot change it. I tried to change it earlier, so it will be easier for you guys to understand. But here is Aave, and it can tell you, and here it tells you, for example, on DAI, you can receive 10% APY on DAI just by depositing it. On USDC, it's 15%. So it's nothing to frown upon, right? It's kind of a high interest, but you can borrow USDT, for example, you can borrow it for 3% APR. And where would you find these kind of interest rates in centralized finance? I don't think you would. Like credit card debt goes up really quickly, right? If you take a loan, it's, I think, at least from what I could check, you won't be able to go with less than 10% a year, right? And on BSC, which is another network, the main one is Venus. So let's say Venus Finance. Let's take a look at how it looks. So not only it is lending and borrowing platform, it's also like a stable coin creating platform. So it has this stable coin called VI, which is an algorithmic stable coins. And I think we have like a specific Bandito deep dive into the different types of stable coins. And yeah, it has its own stable coin, and it has its own borrowing and lending. And as you can see right here, some of these even have like negative interest for you to borrow. Especially at the start, they incentivize you to borrow, to use the platform. And so you're not even paying interest. So again, as you can see, on USDC 15%, on BUSD 10%, USDT 14%. And this is commonly regarded as a very safe place to just generate yield. Okay, so 15% again is quite a lot. So if the platform is not well known and it has not been around for long, and the total value locked, which you can generally see in those platforms, I don't know where it is right here, but you can search on the internet, the total value locked on it is low, and the platform is recent, and it has no audits. One of the resources that you can check is this guy called Rug Doctor. So it just checks for the rug pulls. Let me see. Yeah, for some reason it's looking at the like carpet cleaners. Let's check like Rug Doctor. Yeah, aquí here, rugdoc.io. So you can check for every project, like not everyone, but they have covered a lot of projects and done a full report on it, and high risk, low risk, some risk, medium risk on many different platforms. So AVAX, IOTAX, many different blockchains. Okay. And it is a pretty interesting resource, especially if it hasn't been audited on CertiK and you want to take that risk, right? Okay. So trading in LPs, you probably know those is those insert something here swap. So Uniswap, Pancake Swap, Sushi Swap, Bakery Swap, Ape Swap, and Buy Swap. There are many, and in some of them, as I said right at the very beginning, you can also generate some sort of passive income in the form of the share of a profit they collect on the platform. So if you stake the coins in a pool, you gain part of the profits that the platform pays. So it can really add up. So again, if you go to Pancake Swap currently, I think the APY for the cake, which is their native token, it's currently at 50% or something like that. Now this is not on a stable coin, right? It's on a volatile coin. So again, you should be careful because you're earning interest in a volatile coin, and also the coin fluctuates up and it fluctuates down. So the interest might not work out the way you think it would. So for some reason, let me see. Yeah, right here, pools. For some reason, all of the DeFi websites are kind of very, very laggy for me, like today and yesterday when I was trying to set the lesson up. It's not usually like this. Let me see if it loads right now or soon. Yeah, so you can see the automatic like compounding. So this is something that you should pay attention if the pool is compounding for you or if you should compound. The auto compound cake pool, it is paying 72% a year, which is again relatively high. It's a very consolidated project. It's very trustworthy, I would think, right? So again, it's a way to generate passive income. Okay. Again, you should pay attention to audits, do your own research. And with swaps specifically, when you're swapping a coin for the other, make sure that first you're swapping for the right coin. So when you go to the coin market cap of that coin, let me just grab the coin market cap right here. Let's say I want to trade this taboo token, right? You must make sure that you're using this contract address right here when you're trading, because sometimes you can see like scam coins that have malicious contracts that either don't let you sell, or even in some coins, especially if it's a coin that you don't know that has been airdropped to your wallet, it can have malicious code that just wipes your wallet clean. So that's also something to be careful with. Okay. Okay, so yield up optimizers, there are many on many different platforms. It's some like a very nice way to generate some passive income. And they just, as I said previously, they combine multiple different methods to generate yield in a single platform that you just deposit one coin and forget about it, and it just generates that yield for you. So examples for Ethereum, they include Yearn Finance, they include Harvest, and BSC examples include Alpaca Finance and Beefy Finance. And let's check out Yearn Finance. As I said, the dApps are currently not being very fast on my computer, so we wouldn't have the time to just go through them all. Although I would like it, it wouldn't be practical because it would take just so long. So this is Yearn Finance, and you can go here, for example, in vaults, and you could see as we load, there are like many different tokens to stake, many different rewards to gain. And again, the APY is not so low, right? For example, right here, you can earn 52% or something like that, right? Okay. Now you should try to find protocols that have been audited. Again, I emphasize the audit part, especially on Binance Smart Chain, because on Binance Smart Chain, you have a lot of scams, a lot of Rockpools, and read through the audits and make plenty of research, because there are a lot of scams, okay, that fit your risk criteria for their yield optimization. So there are yield optimizers that are not, getting yield from audited pools. So would you invest in a yield optimizer that has that? I wouldn't, right? So you just need to check the criteria, talk to the team if it's not on the white paper. Okay. Okay. So now let's look into some real life examples. So one example that has popped up in our Discord very recently is this platform called Donkey Finance, which is a community-driven yield optimizer on Binance Smart Chain and also other chains. So let's go here to Donkey Finance. Let's go here to launch app. And you can see it has some very, very high interest rates, right? So first, you're going to see that the stuff that those do it's not necessarily like just one protocol. So you can see it has multiple steps right here. So it's going to Swamp Finance, then from Swamp Finance, it's getting the rewards and reinvesting and swapping it for Cake and reinvesting in Swamp, and just then getting a little part for Planet Finance. So it uses all that process to generate more yield. And it is a user that did that. All right, it's not just the team, it's a user that did that, and the process is pretty public right here. Now, as you can see, if you have the Dawn token, that's when you start getting the higher rewards. Now, the problem with the Dawn token, let's just take a look, is that as most of these Degen farms are, it's a really inflationary token. So let's see 1 month. And you can see it has kind of been trending down. Of course, it has this initial pump from the initial adoption, but it does kind of trend down with time. Okay, so inflationary tokens might not be actually the smartest thing to hold. Okay, okay. So another example is a Rockpool that made the news recently. So from the Netflix series Squid Game, it was a token that the devs started chilling on Twitter, and it turned out to be a classic Rockpool. So not even pretending that they're not, you just could buy the token, but it was completely impossible to sell the token. So only the developers could sell the token. So as in the series, only one person wins, which is the dev, right? Now, of course, this is an extreme example. It was a dumb, purposeless meme coin. So, I mean, it had no project, it had no ideas, nothing, and it ended up being a rug pull. But rug pulls, they come in all flavors, and you should really do extensive research. Some people put a lot of effort into making a rug pull look like a legit project, and it really does, but eventually it becomes a rug pull. And if you talk to Pete, he'll tell you a little bit about the 2 rug pulls that he has been a victim of. But again, you should be careful, you should do your research, and when you're going to these more risky things, please do not put a large sum of money, okay? And so that even if it is a rug pull, maybe you learn something from it, okay? And now lastly, as we come close to the 1 hour that we have, we could stay more, but as we come close to the 1 hour, what about the stock insurance ones that we talked a little bit about earlier that use oracles and all that stuff? So they connect to the reward world, right? And that makes them a lot more complicated. So first, let's take a look at the mirror protocol. So here, the mirror protocol, you can go to the web app. Now, as I said, there's the Ethereum version, which is a little bit harder to use. And again, on Ethereum, you'll pay like tremendous fees. It's just absurd to make a swap on Ethereum. I think it's like over $200 just for a swap. And there's the Terra version. Now, let's take a look at the Terra version. Just wait for it to load. And then you can see the total value locked in on these protocol is approximately $1.6 billion. So there's a lot of money into it, a lot of liquidity, as you can see, over $800 million, a lot of collateral into it, and also the mirror token, which is their like governance token. They have like almost $90 million staked of it. Okay, now we can go to, for example, trade, and you can see we can buy like exposure to many different stocks, and not even just stocks, maybe some mirror Bitcoin, like in this case. So let's see if this is actually accurate. Okay, let's say the Apple stock, $151. Let's see what is the Apple stock looking like now. Let's go to now. So $150. So it's basically the same for all intents and purposes. And here you can also borrow, and you can go long, and you can go short, right? And you can even place limit orders. So it's a pretty complete flat platform, and the transaction fees are relatively low. Okay. Okay. There's also the platform that I mentioned earlier, which is EtherRisk. And it is aiming to provide some insurance protocols to many different like applications. Let me see. So flight delay insurance, crop insurance for example, the some canyons, hurricane protection, social insurance, collateral protection for crypto loans, crypto wallet insurance if you get hacked or something like that. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening right now, and a lot of interesting applications for smart contracts and DeFi. Okay, so yeah, that was about it. If you guys have any questions, anything that wasn't clear, anything at all, you can ask now. If you just want to talk, that's cool too.
Hey, Tchello, that was an amazing deep dive. Thanks for that. And one question I have is, how do you track for impermanent loss?
Yes. So tracking for impermanent loss is quite a difficult problem to solve, right? Because there are some platforms, like some trackers, that let you track. However, they require you to pay for it. So they automatically do that for you. And there's this one, which is called Yield Watch, which I hate because it's so ugly, right? They do not care about design or anything. And you just paste your wallet address right here. And if you buy enough of their token, then you can use those more advanced functionalities. And like, for example, this website, if you pay for it, you can track the impermanent loss automatically. However, there is like there are calculators for impermanent loss. So there's this one, which is the most like complete one that I know, which is called Baller. You can just like search for Baller, and it even supports the impermanent loss calculation for those more complicated liquidity pools that I mentioned earlier. So you can have multiple assets. So you can have like 4 assets at one time. You can have different weights. You can have a liquidity pool that is 80-20 or something like that, and it calculates the impermanent loss for you. So how do you use that? Well, for the usual liquidity pools, you just put 50-50 for the pool weight, right? And here you see, let's say the liquidity pool is Ethereum, USDC. So USDC, it stays the same price, right? It's a stable coin. Now let's say Ethereum goes up by 400%. Your impermanent loss is about 25%, right? And this is the way to track it kind of manually, to check the difference in prices from the point that you started. So you can take a note it in a piece of paper or in a Google document or maybe in an Excel spreadsheet, and you can track it via here. So for example, if Ethereum instead falls by 20%, again, impermanent loss is kind of small for a small amount. So if it goes up by 20%, relatively small impermanent loss. But if it goes down by 90%, impermanent loss starts getting a little bit bigger, right? Because it's kind of buying Ethereum like at all the points that it's dipping. And so you have a lot less money. Okay. This is the main way to just.
Is there such a thing as impermanent gain?
I mean, there is. It is just unrealized profits, right? But you cannot earn more from like a liquidity pool, except for the trading fees, of course. But from the liquidity pool protocol, at least from the 50-50, I don't know if maybe there is some way, if you have like 10 assets and it fluctuates in a very specific manner, then you might gain some more. But in the usual liquidity pool, it's not, you cannot just earn more than just holding, except for the trading fees. Okay.
Is there one that graphs it out for you?
Graphing it out. Yeah, I don't think there is, but you can just search the graph for it. So this is kind of a graph that I just searched. So as you can see, it is kind of linear when you start going up, and it is kind of a parabola when you start going down. So yeah. I don't know if there's one that graphs. I can like look it up for you later, but
isn't that a unique graph for each individual pair?
no, it is like this is the current price as a percentage of the initial price, right? So let's say Ethereum goes up by 100%. So it is 200% of what it was initially, correct? So the impermanent loss would be approximately right here. And
All right.
so on. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, and also I should say, yeah, this graph right here, it only applies to the 50-50 liquidity pools, because if it is weighted differently, then the graph it becomes different. Let me just impermanent loss liquidity pool graph. Let's see. I thought I had seen this earlier. Yeah, so right here. So if it is 50-50, it is kind of like this. If it is like 80-20, then it is a little bit flatter. 95-5, it is also a little bit flatter. But with those like higher weighted, and this is like the first one is the weight that is allocated in a stable coin. So in this case, it would be 80% stable coin and 20% Ethereum, for example. So with this, you have a lower possible reward, right? But a higher, a lower possible risk also. Okay. Anything else?
Nope, but I was just glad to listen. I understood about 10% of what you said, but I feel like that's the beginning of me being able to like grasp this whole area, because I've been intimidated by it. So I really appreciate you putting together such a holistic explanation.
Okay. Thanks for coming, everyone. I'm gonna stop the recording now.